Hi everyone, and welcome to the second episode of The Secret Influences of Art. In this segment of the series, we're going to explore the ways different historical periods influence in their own way our perception as contemporary people of what is good visual art and what isn't. Before we start, I want to do a quick little disclaimer that I'm going to focus on the Occidental culture because it is the one we live in. The goal of this podcast is not to undermine other cultures or to say that the Occidental one is the best. In fact, as you might or might not know, there are lots and lots of extraordinary cultures out there, like the Chinese, Egyptian, and Inca culture, to cite a few. However, since you don't want to hear me talk for 2 days straight, I had to make a choice. That being said, the episode will be separated in three distinct parts. First of all, for every one of us to start on the same basis, I'm going to do a quick recap of Occidental history from the antiquity to the time we live in today. Secondly, I'm going to explain in detail the perception of beauty of the ancient Greco-Roman and the Middle Ages societies, which are today respectively called the classic and Christian canons of beauty. Thirdly and finally, to help you understand the application of the theory explained in the beginning of the podcast, I'm going to analyze for you a piece of contemporary art realized by Marina Abramovic, the pioneer of performance art. Let's begin right away. The Greek Empire is said to have started in the 8th century before Christ because the first poems of Homer can be traced back to those times. The landscape of Greece was separated in city-states which all had their own monarchy and basically were at all times at war with one another. The only thing that could rally them together was when a bigger and greater enemy from outer Greece came to invade their borders. So they did their thing during a good 700 years until the Battle of Corinth in 146 before Christ started the process of the overtaking of the Greek Empire by the Roman Empire. In 27 before Christ, the Romans had overwhelmed the Greek armies and the Greco-Roman Empire was born. After the long and sad-to-watch fall of the Roman Empire from the year 395 to 476, the Dark Ages came. During the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church locked away from the general public most of the knowledge acquired during the Antiquity period. And so, artists from those times had no artistic basis nor theory to build their art on like we nowadays have. It might be easy to learn the technique of perspective, but it's a little bit more difficult to simply invent it. So, for 1,000 years, artists in Europe tried to reinvent art from scratch, and that's the main reason why painting from the Middle Ages looked so disjointed. Then, in 1450, Gutenberg invented the printing method, and bam, the Renaissance struck. It became more and more easy to access knowledge, and little by little, the art community rediscovered what had been done during the antiquity. And guess what they thought of it? They found it amazing! And from that point on, the ideas and concepts that had been developed in science, art, and philosophy during the times of Aristotle and Pythagoras made their comeback. After 400 years of artistic renaissance, the photograph was invented, which made the practice of painting objects as they are obsolete. Because what used to take a week, a month, or even a year to paint could be recreated by the instrument in less than a day. Because of that revolution, lots of artists began to question the relevance of simply painting things as they are. Why not explore the mind? The different perspective different individuals can have on an object, or the impact of emotion on what one can create. And so began the modern phase of art, started by Edouard Manet and the Impressionists, but quickly followed by many more. Late modern artists from the 1930s to the 1950s wanted to get away more and more from representation in art. They wanted to create a feeling and let anyone feel something personal when they looked at their piece of art. The contemporary phase that began during the 60s in New York, similarly as the modern phase, did not explore new ways to see the human body and beauty, but was and still is more focused on understanding, criticizing, and creating change in the world we live in today. So, in one way, I could say that this podcast series is a contemporary work of art because we try to help you, viewers, to understand that the kind of creativity that implies creating something entirely new doesn't really exist because everything we do, say, see, or hear is necessarily influenced one way or another by an artist, our past, or even the history of the world. In the classic canon, the body has value in three distinct ways: fertility, strength, and health. Fertility was a beauty factor principally in women because it was their role in society to give birth and ensure the future of the city state. For the feminine part of the story, fertility meant a young person, because as it was already known back then, the peak of fertility in women is around 20 years old. Small breasts, pink lips and cheeks, wide hips, and thick hair were considered signs of being ready to bear a child. Power and force gave value to men because their role was to protect the city from invaders. So, wide shoulder structure, great height, developed muscles, and physical abilities were in vogue in the representation of men in work of art of the times. By the way I described both previous beauty factors, you might have noticed that they are linked to the function men and women occupied in ancient Greece, woman as the childbearer and men as the protector. The way health also gets its place as a beauty influence is because if the warrior is missing a leg or an arm, how can he defend the city? And if the lady is gravely ill, how can we be sure she will be able to endure the hardships of pregnancy, that she and the child will even survive, and most importantly, that the children will be healthy themselves? So health, by affecting so greatly the other beauty factors, became one itself. Now for the Christian canon. Before going into the details of the beauty aspect, I'm going to do a quick rundown of the Bible from the creation of the world to the death of Jesus, so that the people that are not familiar with the story will understand what I'm saying about the Christian vision of the body later on. So, the Bible says that God, the Almighty, created the world in 7 days. The sixth day, He created the first humans: Adam, first man, from a bit of dirt on the ground, and then Eve, the first woman, from one of the ribs of Adam. After finalizing its creation, He told them some things in the line of: Adam, Eve, here in paradise, you are immortal. You can do anything you want and eat everything you want. There is but one rule: don't touch nor eat the fruit of the knowledge tree. Adam and Eve lived happily for quite a while until one day Satan shapeshifted into a snake and, curling up around the forbidden tree, said to Eve, who was alone, "You know, God is lying to you, and you know it too. If you eat a fruit from the knowledge tree, you will know everything God knows. Aren't you curious? I would be in your place." And so Eve grasped the fruit, took a great big bite out of it, and then she ran to Adam and convinced him to eat the fruit too. When Adam realized what they had done, he felt ashamed of having disobeyed God. However, Adam and Eve were naked since their creation. They couldn't hide nowhere in their clothes, so they decided to hide away. When God found them, Eve told him that the snake had convinced her to eat the forbidden fruit and that Adam followed soon after. The punishment of God was the following: they both were kicked out of paradise and stripped of their immortality, and if, but only if, they lived a good life of repentance, would they be able at their death to regain heaven again. Eve's pregnancy would be done in sufferance, and she would have to submit to her husband from now on because it was her weakness that caused this to happen. As for Adam, because of him the ground would be cursed, and from now on he would have to win his bread by the suffering of his body. Let's do a jump in time to the year 1 of our era. That year was born a child that would, with his legacy, change the world forever. It was Jesus of Nazareth, the son of the Virgin Mary and Joseph, an old shepherd. As he grew up, Jesus acquired lots of followers because of the miracles he performed. However, in those times, Judea was under the control of the Roman Empire, which did not like Jesus very much. From their point of view, he was undermining the Roman gods by claiming that he was the son of the one and only God, and that he was here to send the love of his Father to every man on earth. So one day, what was meant to happen, happened. One of his closest friends, Judas, betrayed him and delivered him to the Roman army. After a not-so-fair trial, Jesus ended up crucified on a cross. However, as the story goes, he did not resent Judas. He still considered him with his unconditional love. It is said that even after being betrayed in that way, he was at peace and believed that his sacrifice would wash away the sins of the humanity and enable us humans to start anew. Now that the summary of the important parts of the Bible has been done, let's get right into the Christian vision of the body beauty. We will be looking into 4 important values: mortality, sacrifice, suffering, and finally, the desexualization of the human body. Beginning with the sacrifice and suffering of oneself, by the Christian standard, people must accept God's punishment, live it fully, even embrace it, because it is the only way we as mere humans will be able to demonstrate our submission to His will and regain our rightful place by our Creator's side in paradise. In the story I just told, working to live and painful childbirth are some examples that could be associated with this concept. In the same sense, Christians must follow Jesus' sacrifice for humankind and not be resentful for it. However, since sacrificing oneself for the humankind isn't something easy to do on a day-to-day basis, the principle can be applied to a smaller scale like a country or family. For the value of the body in its mortality, it calls also back to one of the sanctions of God on Adam and Eve. Indeed, when they were kicked out of paradise and put on earth, they were stripped of their mortality, and the only way they could regain heaven was firstly living a life of suffering and sacrifice, and secondly dying after that existence of pain. So the dying body has a tremendous value in and of itself, because it has begun the path to regaining God's side for eternity. Finally, for the desexualization of the body, in the Christian canon, the body is mostly considered as an envelope of flesh for the soul. It has no real value by itself because its value is defined by the action of the person inside, like suffering, sacrifice, and mortality, and not by the appearance or the capacities of the body. Also, in the same line of thinking, the naked body reminisces the shame that naked Adam and Eve felt after disobeying God. This shame explains why in most of the paintings of the Middle Ages it is extremely rare to see more than the skin of the hands and faces of the characters represented, at the exception of Jesus in his loincloth of crucifixion. Now that I've shown you where a part of our influences in the representation of beauty we have come from, we'll directly look how it reflects in art produced nowadays by analyzing a performance by Marina Abramovic called Rhythm Zero, realized in 1974. Unfortunately, it wasn't video recorded, but I will do my best to describe the scene and pictures will be there to illustrate my words. Briefly, the piece can be described as follows. Abramovich was standing in the middle of a gallery room with, in front of her, a table with 76 objects, half for pleasure, like feathers, wine, grapes, and half for pain, like a shoe, knives, and even a gun with one bullet. A note was on the table, and it was read, "I'm an object. You can use everything on the table. I take all responsibility, even killing me. And the time is 6 hours." In the beginning, spectators were kind, gave her hugs, fed her, gave her water, until one person came and gave her a light slap on the face. Since she didn't react, people understood that she would not defend herself against anything they would do to her, and so a man started to cut her shirt, another put rose spines in her belly, some took the knife, cut the performer, and even drank her blood. Women told men what to do, unwanting to perform the atrocities themselves, and the part of the audience too shocked by what was happening didn't do nothing to stop the sadistic actions. After 6 hours of this nightmare, as planned, Marina Abramovic started to move again, and the public ran away from the artist, unable to face the person on whom they had imposed torture during the duration of the performance. Let's now analyze Rhythm Zero from the beauty canon standpoint we talked about before. Starting with the classic canon, Abramovich was only 23 years old when the performance took place, and as discussed previously, a woman in the prime of her youth is generally considered beautiful by the external eye. Even though it is not supposed to be the focal point of the piece, it is still present and mustn't be overlooked. As for the strength she demonstrates when she's armed in many ways and doesn't react, only thanks to her willpower throughout the performance, it is a perfect illustration of the power and force beauty factor. If the 2 points were obvious even to the untrained eyes, the presence of health affecting the quality of the piece is a trickier one. Indeed, Marina begins the performance in a pretty good state, and as the time flies by, the public robs her slowly but surely of her body's integrity by mutilating it, hitting it, and even spitting on it. So, the deterioration of the artist's health in this situation, which can also be associated with the sacrifice and suffering from the Christian canon, helps her demonstrate tangibly the point she was trying to make with Rhythm Zero. People, and even more groups of people, when given all permission and forgiven for any repercussions afterwards, won't hesitate to overpass society moral guidelines, abuse power, and be cruel over other human beings, no matter how much of a moral compass they claim to have. As for the Christian canon, the gun which laid on the table with the object was the limit. No one could go further in this experiment than killing the artist. However, who would want to do that? Who would want to have a death on the conscience? Nobody, really. However, 2 persons in the audience took the gun, put it in the performer's hands, and aimed the firearm at her head, so that at any point she could by accident pull the trigger herself. And those 2 individuals didn't cross the last ultimate moral limit, but they went really, really close to it. And here still, having Abramovich in this near-death situation, as she had almost begun to walk the path of death because of the audience, highlights the cruelty of the public and how far they were willing to pass over society moral guidelines. Finally, the artist began the performance in a black outfit, not sexualizing at all. However, quickly after the beginning of the 6-hour time period, someone cut her shirt in a way that her breast and stomach would be out in the open. After that, people grabbed her, kissed her everywhere. Someone even tried to rape her directly in the gallery room, but was quickly stopped by the audience. As Abramovich says, it is probably because women were there that the men stopped the guy. Desexualization of the desexualized body represents another boundary, which this time was actually crossed by one person in the public. In the same way of the people who almost killed her, here the lack of consideration for her and the traumatisms a rape can leave on someone demonstrate clearly the absence of altruism and the abundance of egocentrism of, if not most of the public, at least a certain part of it. Well, this is it, people. The end of this episode has arrived. In retrospective, I really hope that I will have helped you understand a little bit more about where our perception of beauty comes from and the way in which it repercusses in contemporary art. However, maybe this subject didn't spike your curiosity, and there's no problem with that. Or maybe you just want to learn more about the secret influences of art in general, and that's why my colleagues made 2 more episodes on their own field of knowledge, respectively music theory and music history. So if you want to learn more, go ahead, suit yourself. Also, in the description, I will leave the link for a document I wrote with short bits of thought I wanted to elaborate more about, but didn't really have time in the video to do so, so you can look it up if you want to. I will also leave my sources down below, so you can pursue your research just by yourself. So this is it. Have a good day or maybe a good night, and bye bye.